Okay, good morning, good evening, good afternoon, wherever you are across the globe. Welcome to another On the Sofa with Esther, Tuesday's Words of Wisdom. And tonight, this evening, wherever you are in the world, I will be talking to Robert Kaiser. Have I pronounced your surname correctly, Robert?
The
Was it
different
Kaiser?
ways. Well, it's a German name, so it's Kaiser. But to be honest,
Kaiser.
don't worry about that.
No, I've got people watching me. They're like, Esther, you didn't pronounce that correctly. Um, and we're going to be talking about his book, Never a Victim. And it's a book that empowers women with the most comprehensive safety guide yet. And I'm just going to just read the first para of that. As violence against women continues to escalate, the release of Never a Victim, the definitive guide to women's safety, presents a timely and essential resource filled with information written by personal safety expert Robert Kaiser. This comprehensive guide emerges from over 30 years of research into physical and sexual violence against women. So that's where I'm going to leave that. I'm going to dip into some of the info that I have here, but I'm going to, really have a really in-depth conversation with Robert about this subject. But first and foremost, Robert, I'm going to ask this
Yes.
question that I ask all my guests: Who is Robert in a nutshell, in a
Oh wow.
peanut shell, or a
Oh,
crab shell?
I wish I could give you a short answer to that one. Well, who am I? Okay. I'm the CEO of a company called PPSS Group. We specialize in preventing workplace violence. We produce body armor and different things. Um, but my background is private and overseas security. So I left Germany in 1999. I lived overseas in several countries before I one day came to the United Kingdom and fell in love, as you do,
Mm-hmm.
and made friends. Got stuck on the country. That marriage didn't work out, but nevertheless. And yeah, I set up businesses in the UK and made great friends. And due to the fact that I was always very, very passionate about women's safety, I
Mm.
continued my journey in the UK and became heavily involved in the subject. And that story is even longer. So 25 years ago, I was doing a lot of work with Women's Aid and the rape crisis victim support. I was doing a lot of TV work for Trish and Kilroy, so a long, long time ago.
Mm.
And then I've always been asked, to write a book one day. And I knew the day will come one day. But as you probably will know, it requires a lot of time and peace to do that. And that's what I've done over the last 2.5 years now. But yeah,
Mm.
my background is private security, overseas security, and having dealt with a lot of physical violence and having seen and done a lot of things, I've got a good understanding what violence really looks like and what it takes for women to protect themselves in that world, I believe.
Okay, thank you for that, Robert. Thank you. And so I guess the first question is, I mean, you've spoken about, all the things that you've done that's got you to this place. Why women's safety, Robert?
Again, one of these questions for the answers, unfortunately, way too long.
Because it sort of
It's
feeds
not.
into the book. It feeds for me. It feeds into why you've written the book, and because for a man to come at it from that angle, there's got to have been some sort of history.
Yeah, of course. But there is a lengthy introduction at the at the beginning of the book, sort of explaining my background more thoroughly, I guess. I don't know if you've got
Mm,
the time to listen to the entire answer, but yeah, I came to the UK in early millennium, and I met a very, very lovely young lady. We got on with each other like a house on fire. She was very, very much loved and liked and appreciated in the village where she lived in northern England. And everybody saw her as this kind of lively, kind, bubbly person who was always happy 24/7, etc., etc. And when we met the first time, we had we started having very personal conversation at the very early stages of our relationship. And because of my background, I had demons in my head I need to deal with. I call it demons in my head. And I could sense there was something more to her than just being this 24 hours happy person everybody believed she was. And, and during the very beginning of our relationship, she then explained to me that she had been her drinks had been spiked one day and been sexually assaulted by multiple individuals that night. And yeah, I mean, the kind of conversation we had over a 2-3 years period had a profound impact on my life. And I mean, I reconnected with her almost 20, well, just over 20 years later, literally just a few weeks back before my book was published, because I wasn't sure how much I can go into the details of that story without revealing her identity. And it was her who she said, listen, up even now, her own daughter, who's now a young adult, doesn't know about that. And her own mother doesn't know about that. And that sort of had a profound impact on my life. It was not the fact, the violence or the aspect of violence. I was used to violence, and violence doesn't emotionally bother me. Unfortunately, it's what it is. And I'm not hard or tough or any of that. It's just the nature of my professional background. What had an impact? That I was in the presence of a young lady who had to be an actress, in her opinion, 24 hours a day in front of her mother, her best friend, her own daughter, and nobody knew what actually happened in her life. And I felt like that can't be right. That can't be, you can't suffer in silence for the rest of your life and not speak to anyone. And I was really privileged that she told me. And then it's called coincidence either way. Years later, before I got happily married, and I am happily married. Before I got happily married, I got into another relationship briefly, and with a young woman from Afghanistan. And again, it called coincidence. I can't tell you exactly why it all happened, but we started talking, and we spent about 2-3 years together, and another cracking time. And she always told me about, because I told her about my background and my passion for women's safety and the research I did. And she trusted me in the early stages, and she opened up pretty quickly. And she told me about all the fears and all the history she was involved in terms of honor-based violence, because she was originally from Afghanistan. She came over here to the UK, to Leeds, did a master's degree in sociology, and it was very, very westernized, and she loved the Western world. But there were so many details I heard about what she had been through. And one day, 2-3 years into this relationship, she got a call from members of her family that her parents from Afghanistan had traced her, and that they were en route to Leeds Bradford Airport to force her to get married. And she literally, and I'm not exaggerating, she literally packed her stuff and left the city and the country 24 hours later, out of fear of what would happen to her if she would stay. And they were like, sort of, no, there are two stories that I personally was involved in for quite a long time, for 1,000 days or whatever, that, yeah, maybe I had a sense of righteousness of saying that isn't right. That can't be what, and I knew that I was so passionate about it. I had done a lot of research at the same time, parallel. And that's probably the like little reasons. I call it marginal. There are different reasons that are coming together, where ultimately I said, listen, enough is enough. I've developed such a level of understanding from a different perspective sometimes that I feel it's worth to put into writing. I'm not rambling on,
Excellent.
am I? Good.
No, 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 no.
Okay.
No, because I like I said, I've dipped into what you've said, but it's nice to hear it coming from you because you're bringing it to the live, and especially with the title of the book, "Never a Victim." Now that is quite a powerful statement in terms of just those two experiences that you've shared. And one of the questions I want to ask you, and we are going to dip into your research and everything like that, but how can someone who's gone through what some sort of fear violence not feel a victim? How is it, where do they go to, where do they dip into, what is it that they need so that they don't feel they're a victim? because there's lots of emotional entanglement in that. There's lots of guilt. There's lots of, all these different emotions in that pot. And yet your book says never a victim, which in itself is quite empowering.
Well, to start with one thing what you just said, but personally, I don't like, and many individuals I'm associated with or working within the women's support field, passionately hate the word victim, because the moment you call those individuals victim, you're already telling them. Now, that's already very, very negative terminology. So I always, and everybody else, prefers to use the terminology survivor, because clearly that tells them they have survived something, but rather than constantly reminding them of the fact that they have been victimized, if that makes sense.
Okay,
You
yeah.
know what I mean? But in terms of how do you where do you go from an assault, or where do you go from that kind of experiencing violence? I don't know. I've always believed it's a massive impact in my life, and I've been involved in a lot of things. It's always who do you surround yourself with. Now, if you're surrounding yourself with individuals who constantly remind you on what you went through, and how hard and how horrific it was, and how much sympathy you deserve, I'm not sure entirely sure that the way forward. I think for me, I call it. There's a story I was once told, and I don't want to get sidetracked. I'll get back to your point, but I remember 1995 was involved in working with the German government in different kind of environments. There was and one lady who was sort of a great senior of mine. She told me once a very, very short story. That's the shortest story you can imagine, and it's the most impactful story that has changed my life forever. Okay, it's just the most powerful story I can tell everyone. And the story is very simple. It goes: there are American father and son, American Indians, sitting around the campfire. And the son is realizing that his father is struggling with things on his mind, with historical things, whatever, and he's clearly struggling. And the son asked the father, what is going on? And the father said, son, I've got a fight in my head between the demons and the angels. And the son asked him, okay, daddy, who's winning? And the father said, the one I'm feeding. And for me, that has changed my life. So
Yes.
the best advice I can give anyone, any survivor, anyone, male or female, it doesn't matter what type of violence, by the way, I think it's absolutely essential that you surround yourself with individuals who show you the light, and not make the darkness look even darker. I think, and you can show individuals who have suffered violence the light partly by listening, by actually listening, and by not being judgmental, by really making them feel and sense that you really believe them. And I think if they have people around them who listen to them, who believes them, who give them help and support, without asking anything in return, then there's always the possibility to see the light again, and that's what it takes to survivors to recover from incidents like that.
Okay. Well, what I'm going to do, I'm just going to read this now, and then we're going to go. I'd like you to go into some of the research that you've done around this body of work. So it says, Kaiser's extensive research involved analyzing crime reports, victim testimonies, and coroner's records, that ensuring that the book is firmly rooted in real-world experiences. His collaborations with government agencies, support organizations, and survivors underscore his commitment to preventing violence against women and mark him as a leading voice in this field. So what I'd like you to do now, Robert, is let's go into a bit of your research, and interestingly, your commitment to preventing violence against women. That's sort of stood out for me. How do you prevent violence against women?
And obviously, ultimately, I ended up writing 514 pages about it. Now, apparently more than 111,000 words. So now, where do you start? Where do you stop? I think that the cornerstones of personal safety, or the cornerstones of preventing violence, in my opinion, and I know I'm right with that. I have two things of opinion. One is awareness. It's a single word. We can go there in a second and explain it further. The second word would be your intuition.
Yes.
So how do you prevent violence? I think now the combination of being aware, and obviously this is more complex than just this single word. I'm obviously wrote an entire
Yes,
chapter just
absolutely.
awareness, and equally now I've written an entire chapter about intuition. But I think if you get these both aspects right, then it becomes very, very difficult. I mean, to be violated. I think.
Okay. Okay. And so
What?
go
Sorry.
ahead, sorry.
Well, yeah, but in terms of awareness, but the obvious things. I'm not trying to be, but no, it's like look, it's like wearing headphones. As an example. I mean, we've got two options, haven't we? And that's all right. That's individual choices, and I'm not, there's no judgment in it at all. But I think if we are entering an environment, it doesn't matter where it is, if we go into someone's home or house or party, and everybody happy, but as long as we are aware, we can sense if dynamics are changing, if the atmosphere is changing, if the vocabulary is changing, if individuals are turning hostile, if individuals are turning intoxicated. We can, if we are aware, we notice if people are making jokes, if they're making rude jokes, and if we were aware, we identify that some of these rude jokes are targeting me as an individual, etc., etc. So that's your state of awareness, isn't it? And your awareness is, and again, I wrote in my book in great depth. It's like if you're going for a run, and I go running every day, but if you go for a run and you wear your headphones, okay, then you are removing a certain part of your ability and capability of understanding what is going on around you. Okay, it's like what I say in my book is like, if you compare human beings with the wildlife, you can compare it. If you look at the tigers or leopards or whatever they are, and you compare, and you look at the gazelles and these kind of animals, and the wildebeest, whatever, a gazelle will completely rely on their senses, and their senses will be sharpened. I mean, they will smell everything around them, and they will listen to everything around them. And as long as they can smell, as long as they can sense there's a tiger or leopard nearby, they've got a significant chance of staying alive and outrunning the tiger. Are you with me? But imagine you put a headphone on an antelope, or you put an earbud, whatever, into a gazelle's ear. I think you will have significantly increased the chance of them not making it. Does that make sense? So I
Yes.
think we have got so many options now. If you go into a train, your level of awareness. Now, I understand how hard. I mean, I understand if you've been working for 8 hours a day and go into your train and you're trying heading home and you are exhausted. I mean, so yeah, I understand that you want to close your eyes for 10 minutes. I get it. Listen, I'm a human being. I understand you're tired. I understand you want to close your eyes. But you got to understand that if you do close your eyes in a train, that you will not be aware of your environment. Someone could drop something into your water bottle, a drug. I mean, nobody would notice if you're leaving the train 10 minutes later with a male that you've never met because you're so intoxicated because somebody spiked your drink. So I think by being aware of our environment, being aware of the situation, of being aware of my own ability and capabilities, that will have a significant impact on your personal safety, and it will help you to prevent facing violent encounters. And the
Okay.
other one is intuition, but awareness is.
So if I present this to you, because oftentimes, I mean, men are obviously a lot physically stronger than women. And like you said, sometimes because for me, I remember when I was growing up in my teens and early 20s, I was harassed constantly. But I did realize that if I walked a certain way and I carried myself a certain way, they would sort of leave me alone. But it was this constant harassment. And then just because I've traveled quite a bit, traveling through to certain countries, there's also this perception, or oftentimes the cultural perceptions of how they perceive women. And I remember I'm not going to mention the country, but I went to a particular country, and I felt so, my I call it my spidey senses, or my intuition was so honed. And sometimes if someone came in directly into my space, it was, how do I manage this? How do you handle that? So what are some of the, say, tips that you can suggest to sometimes also thwart that physical violence? Because I've always been very intuitive.
Yeah, obviously this. No, personally, I think this is almost like when I wrote my book. That is the very, very end of the book. That is like the last resort. I think for me, the conversation for me personally should always be about helping and enabling females not to get in this situation. Okay, so and I will answer your question now without any question before we're leaving. Before I leave you today, now in terms of how we can physically respond to violence. That's the thing. But I think it's worthwhile to sort of now explore further what we can to avoid it. Being aware and avoiding circumstances are absolutely essential. And when it comes to traveling, for example, is there's so much we can do. Like
Mm,
that's from the travel safety point of view. Doing your research. I mean, it's really fun. Speaking to your government, whatever. There are websites or web pages on your own government website. There foreign travel advice, whatever you call it. Investigate exactly what is the culture in this country. I mean,
yes.
what is their
Yeah.
perception of women? No, what women's
Mm-hmm.
rights? No, what are the women's rights? No? How do they feel about no alcohol? No, in terms of dress code, what should I be wearing, etc., etc. And it doesn't make it right. Some patriarchal
Mm,
countries, there are many decades or centuries behind how we are in the United Kingdom or in America or in Germany. But it is what it is. So we only got one
mm,
option. We can either fight it or go there and adapt to it. So
mm,
understanding and doing your research again, it's a massive step forward of staying safe. But also, if you are in a foreign country, and I've also just definitely be aware of everything. I'm very aware
yes.
of if any individuals are becoming too friendly. Like if I would be a woman on
Yes.
my own and a man, I've never met. Yeah, suddenly, if I looked at my suitcase and there is I don't know, a sticker of my favorite music band on there, and suddenly a stranger approaches me, oh, that's my favorite band. Well, maybe it's coincidence, but maybe it's not. I guess.
Mm,
If someone says, if someone says, "Oh, what you're eating is my favorite food," that yes, every relationship starts somewhere, and sometimes
mm,
at a hotel bar, at a foreign country. I get that, but we also need to understand that the motivation of someone pointing something out and pretending it's exactly what he likes too could have a way more sinister reason. I guess me. So I
mm,
think, when I'm in a foreign country, something happened as coincidence. Well, I'm very conscious of that. I don't believe in coincidences. If a strange man says, "Oh," like at a train at an airport, you take a taxi, and you
mm.
say to the taxi driver, "I'm going to the Hilton Hotel in city center," and the man next to you says, "Huh, guess what? I'm also going to the
The
Hilton."
same. Yeah.
Well, is this really coincidence, or is it
Mm,
just no? You know what? I know I can split the taxi bill in half, but I rather don't and prioritize my safety. It's constantly speaking to yourself and saying, is a decision I'm
mm,
about to make in the
mm,
best interest of my safety? And,
mm,
and, and that almost leads to the other the subject I mentioned earlier on, intuition. I think our intuition is our best friend, and I've heard so many stories, and I've written so many stories within the book I've written about intuition, where intuition is proving us again and again that we can rely on it. The problem, and this is a massive problem, that women have been taught to ignore it. I think
mm,
women have been taught to be, be kind to a man, be friendly, don't embarrass someone else, don't make a scene, da di da di
mm,
da, and the list goes on forever. Rather than saying, you know what, I'm prioritizing my safety. And the best example I came up with in the book is, imagine you are in a skyscraper in a higher building, and you're waiting for the lift. The lift opens, and you see a man that, for what absolutely irrelevant reason, doesn't make you feel right. It doesn't matter what it is. If it's his
yes.
haircut, his smile, his smell, his clothing, his
Mm,
tattoos, it doesn't matter. Okay, it's just telling you, I don't like him. Now you've got two options. You can either think, and I think a lot of women have told me the story during all my research the last 30 years, that they probably would be very likely to enter the lift because they wouldn't want to make this man
Yeah.
feel like, oh, I mean, I'm avoiding the lift
Mm-hmm.
because I don't like you, or no, or I want to avoid you, or they don't want to cause a scene. So they'd rather go into a steel box, in a soundproof steel box, than waiting for that next lift, but that probably will come 30 seconds later. So it's your intuition telling you, what, something is right here. And I wish, and that's sort of one of the things in terms of, I empower women to say, listen, ignore what you may think the men will think or feel. Nobody cares about that guy in the lift. What I care about is that you outside the lift are right now safe, and you can listen to intuition and remain safe, or you can ignore your intuition and enter an environment where you may experience something you don't want to experience, So it's listening to our inner voices. So we all have got that. And intuition has got two things. Primary one thing, it has always got your well-being at heart. Your intuition will never tell you something that gets you into trouble. Never. It's absolutely impossible. Your intuition would rather be risk adverse and be overprotective, or maybe get paranoid, but it will never get you into trouble or into risk. So clearly, you've got a higher likelihood of winning and staying safe by listening to it than rather ignoring. It's just taking this 1 second and saying, "What does my inner voice actually tell me?"
Yeah, I hear that. It's interesting you say that, because I had an experience yesterday, and my intuition was telling me from 2 weeks ago I needed to leave, you know, leave a certain environment at the weekend. I was going into a work environment, and I didn't, and it sort of blew. So I totally understand. And for me also, as a female, that's also why people have said that I've been in places where angels have feared to tread,
Yeah,
because I've listened to that intuition. And sometimes people
yeah,
have said to me, how did you come out of that alive? Because there has been quite a few situations when I've traveled overseas, and I remember it was to it was to the Cameroon many years ago, and I was supposed to be working for a charity. Got to the airport, didn't see anybody. Called up, didn't hear anyone, and about an hour later, I was still in the airport. So the porter said, "My friend there has a taxi," and I knew on one point I had that little, but then on the other side, my intuition said, "You're safe." Still 2 hours later, I was still traveling, and I started to feel a bit dizzy, but my spirit said, "You're safe." And 3 hours after I had landed, I got to the hotel. The hotel said, "We don't have you booked in." And these two men said, "Come with us and we'll bring you back tomorrow." And I saw the manager behind the desk. I just saw his energy. And the next day he goes, "I would have put you in a broom cupboard." But since then, the government changed the government have changed their rules and laws around my experience. And I remember having a meeting with the consulate, and they said, "You could have been shipped across as a sex slave." And I remember saying, I said, "But I knew I was protected." And it
yeah.
was, and I knew for them that would have been, what do you mean? But I just had this feeling, and I just knew I was protected. So I can resonate with what you're saying. And so, Robert, in terms of your in terms of statistics, if we can just touch on some of the statistics, because I think, and you can put me right if I'm wrong, um, the rates of, is it violence against women, or the numbers are going up?
Yes, the numbers are going up. There's a question about it. In many countries, but
Yeah.
I think it's always when it comes to statistics, I always take it with a pinch of salt, because obviously when
Mm,
you read the newspapers, they will always utilize statistics and data to scaremonger the world, because ultimately
mm,
bad news and shocking news, they will sell newspaper. We just have to
it
remind
sells.
ourselves. So when we hear about specific countries or regions where the rate of reported sexual violence or rape or domestic abuse or domestic violence are increasing, then I'm not saying that is the case or it's not, but I always take it with a pinch of salt in terms of it may well be that reporting procedures have changed. Okay, so the
Mm-hmm.
one thing could be, for example, that law enforcement are now investigating those crimes much more thoroughly in these countries. Women in those countries are welcoming the news. They develop a relationship of trusting. Okay, actually, my voice will be listened to. I
Mm-hmm.
will be trusted. My complaint or my crime will be taken serious. So you've got, of course, more women feeling empowered to step forward and say, it happened to me too. And that's what happened with the Me Too movement, for example. It will empower
Yes.
women. So the more empower women, you empower women by either forcing or urging the police to investigate thoroughly, or if, let me say, perpetrators are getting sentenced more severely, that could be also
Yes.
an empowering reason for women to come forward. It could be a Me Too movement. It could be more women organizations being set up and offering an easier, accessible service. Those are all reasons why you could have an increase of certain violence in certain countries. It doesn't always necessarily mean there is a real genuine increase of violence. Are you with me? That's
Mm.
so statistics is very difficult to trust them. So
Mm.
I'm all very. I think that when I see the news coming up with statistics, I'm always thinking, oh, they're walking on thin ice, because that's not always really the fact, always not truthful. And there's
Mm.
some data in the UK clearly available, and I just took us from early on that when Sir Mark Rowe, the chief of London Metropolitan Police, in June, he said there were 4 million perpetrators in the UK of violence against women and girls. There are 4 million perpetrators in this country right now. That's the number. I mean, I've got them right next to me. I
Mm.
mean, 800,000 women became victim of sexual assault annually. It's absolutely more than 1.4 million suffered domestic abuse in 2023. But there are numbers that have been not reported by the news, but also verified by women's organizations such as Women's Aid or Rape Crisis and Victim Support. So it's also important to see the data and statistics and get them verified from other organizations who have got no invested interest.
Mm. And I don't know, but I'm going to ask this question
Yeah.
in that, is there a reason for the rise? I mean, what is attributed to the rise in, we say, violence against women and children?
Yeah. Okay. That's a good question. I mean, no, I think that there's almost another question that could only be almost answered in the context. Now, what does it take to eliminate violence against women? I
Okay.
mean, that's a good question, because
Yeah.
ultimately it's almost the same. It's similar. It's an answer. They're very, very close connected to these questions. So one of the ways of ending violence against women, people always ask me, is it possible? Do you believe that 10 years from now that violence against women actually is not existent anymore? And I thought, I can't tell you if it's 10 years from now, but I wholeheartedly believe it's possible. But I
Mm.
do believe that it's only possible if specific long-term strategies and immediate action will be taken. So one of the things I always keep talking about is like looking at young male boys who have either been abused themselves or who have
Okay.
witnessed abuse in one way or another. That means either by the parents, by friends, by gangs, or in a
Mm.
conflict zone, in a war environment.
Yeah.
Because the first thing is to break the cycle of violence, because the probability that a 40 young boy who has been sexually abused by the parents is very high that they may also become perpetrators. The key is to look after them, to give them all the help, the support they need, from the psychological support, counseling, treatment, whatever it takes to prevent them from becoming perpetrators as well. That's number one. I think
Mm.
next one, again, to answer your question at the same time, why is an increase of violence? It's a word, misogyny it's a big word now. It's a real key word in Google. Misogyny is a real thing. There's so many male out there now in today's society, in all countries, who are turning online, who have got their own YouTube channel and God knows what have you, on ranting on about, what they think about women and what women should be doing and how second class they are and God knows what have you. And the list goes on forever. I think there's a real I think there's a real obligation from the government point of view, I believe, but also from those who own social media. It's Mark Zuckerberg or Elon Musk, or it doesn't matter who they are, and say, hang on,
Mm,
people can post their favorite dogs and poodles or what they eat for lunch on Facebook as much as they want. That's okay. But to rant on about how much they hate women and how
mm,
little a woman means, that has to be prevented at some point on social media, because otherwise you've got 13 to 14 years young boys listening to it every single day and following those individuals, and they will be absolutely incapable of expressing genuine love to a woman and allowing her to have the same rights like they have if they've listened
mm,
for 3 years to guys on YouTube ranting on how little worth women are. That's another one. I think, and clearly another way of to eliminate violence against women is also about, I think there's a real lack of trust women have in terms of law enforcement and the justice system. I think, never mind, your police officers who are guilty themselves of rape or sexual assault, but this is just off the chart, off the scale, really.
yeah,
But I think that it has to change. Women have to know that they can go to law enforcement, that their voice will be listened to, that they will be heard, that they will be believed, that the crime will be investigated. And when it comes to court, they need to trust that the judge will impose a sentence that is sort of somehow in line with the crime, and not people being released 3 months later. So they're
yeah,
all, I mean, they're all, because ultimately there is crime and punishment. There is, like, as a perpetrator, not of every single crime, but a lot of perpetrators or criminals now, if they would know there's a specific penalty at the end, that is the legal consequence of them getting caught, it potentially could be a deterrent, I guess. But if they believe, if I get caught, so what?
mm,
I've got, I don't know, internet and broadband in a prison cell, and God knows what have you, and 3 course meal every day. Clearly, that's a very, very little preventative measure against those men.
mm,
And I think we need to make it easier for women to 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 seek help, to find help in terms of women support organizations. Uh, Again, I've dedicated an entire chapter to domestic abuse. I had hundreds of people over the last 30 years ask me, why does a woman who gets beaten up unconsciously on a weekly, monthly basis, why is she staying at home, type of thing? And it's like, well, I think we need to enable those individuals to come forward, to tell their story, to share it with the world, and empower others to share their stories. And only then, all these voices combined will have an impact, no question about that. And only the voices combined will make governments change the laws. It will
mm,
force police to investigate more thoroughly. You know what I mean?
mm.
I think we need to give those individuals who have suffered violence a much greater support, a much greater, easier access to
Easier,
support.
yes.
Yeah.
And um, I've got another sort of few minutes here, but you said something earlier about boys, boys who have been experienced violence and how to interrupt that, um, and so that they know that they can go and receive counseling, they can go and receive support. But for a lot of men, boys, they find it a lot harder than women to go and seek some sort of support or help, because being there's this whole thing of being a man and what it is to be a man, and men don't cry, men don't share. And I know a lot of that because I did a couple of shows over the past few years where I've had a body of men come on and actually share their journey of going through trauma and sometimes
Yeah.
abuse, and just allowing other men, it allows other men, gives them permission to say it's not, being vulnerable is not a weakness, it's a strength, and going and seeking support is a strength. So how can we enforce that message as well? And I guess a 14 or 15-year-old who's been abused, they're going through their changes, those emotions, and then they're being abused. Oftentimes it's hard for them to reach out unless, and I've seen this, unless there's a male that they really trust, that they can build some sort of bond with, that allows them to be vulnerable. What do you think? Can I leave that with you?
Yeah, I think it's knowing there's someone out there for sure. I mean, it's it's the key for its unconditional help. Knowing there's someone willing to give you unconditional help. Someone who trusts you, someone who believes you, someone who will not judge you, someone who will empathize with you, somebody who will sympathize with you, etc., etc. They're all things that we as bystanders need to show the world that we are here to listen, that we are here to engage with individuals who have suffered violence and let them tell the story. But I think again, if you look what happened in Paris and France at the moment with Giselle Pellicot, which is like, she's just adorable in her own right. It's just so empowering, And I think unfortunately, it needs more individuals like this who say very clearly the shame must be with the perpetrator, not with the victim, I think. And I think if young men or women for that matter, I mean, if women go experience sexual violence, I think the biggest message in my book is again, it's not your fault. It doesn't matter how intoxicated you were. It doesn't matter what jokes you listened to or not. It doesn't matter what clothing you wear. It doesn't matter if you walk in the middle of the night, half naked on the high street. It doesn't matter. No one has got the right to do something to you that you don't want. The word that defines rape as far as UK law is concerned is the word consent. The moment you don't have not given your consent, someone is committing rape, I think. And I think really that's a very important message, that what individuals realize it's never your fault. There's nothing to be ashamed of. There's nothing. I mean, the shame has to be placed on the perpetrator, and that was happening in Paris, in France right now, and this has got impact globally. It's stories like that literally can change the world,
Yeah, and we've sort of winding down. I mean, I feel I can go on with this conversation, and I hope those who are listening are being inspired, being influenced, being empowered, whatever it's doing for you at this moment in time. And Robert, what other messages would you like to share before we sort of really wind down around how to stay true to you in understanding you are not the victim? What other advice or would you like to share around that?
I think one advice I always like to give, and I hope it's a good advice, is that we as society, when a lot of women I've spoken to, when we talk about perpetrators who commit some of these most horrific crimes in terms of violence against women, if it's rape, sexual assault, sexual abuse, domestic violence, whatever it may be, that we always refer to the individuals who commit these crimes as monsters. And and they are monsters. I fully understand why we say they're monsters. I have one little problem with that. The more we talk about monsters, we put a picture in the female's head, in my opinion, that those guys are very easy recognizable. Now I believe, I feel sometimes as when there may be women out there who go on a night out and looking for men with a horn and looking for the devil, but they are not. That's not the bad guy. What I'm saying is, of all the research I've conducted, are you there? Sorry.
Yeah, I'm here. Yeah, it broke up a bit. Yeah. Can you see me?
Yeah.
I'm here.
I can hear a lot.
Yeah.
One of the most important messages is like every perpetrator, every predator, every monster is someone's favorite son, someone's best friend, someone's favorite neighbor, someone's boyfriend, someone's pal, whatever. So every predator, every monster has got their own social circle. So that means the 99.9% of monsters and predators are hiding in plain sight. So let's not look at men and think, okay, he looks like, no, you know what? I have seen men with tattoos and all sorts of weird things, whatever, that might not be to everyone's attraction, but they might be really good people.
Yes.
But then we look at people in a police uniform and take for granted they are angels, but we know that's not the case either. So what I'm saying is, listen, don't judge people don't look for monsters. They're not dressed differently. They don't talk differently. Some of the predators or monsters I've investigated, I've written about in my book, have been described by the lawyers, by the media, by journalists as some of the nicest men. There was one case, a serial murder in America who has raped several women, and the investigative journalist said, if I would have take a walk in the middle of the night, turned around, and I was seen Michael Bruce Ross, I would have thought, what a nice guy, I'm safe.
Wow.
That's the judgment she made if she would have walked in the middle of the night in New York. That's a different thing. And we have to realize that's not the case. It's 90%. That's my last, and then I'll leave you in peace. But the Glasgow University did a research project in 2018, and they interviewed thousands of survivors of sexual assault. Glasgow University. Over 90% of victims or survivors knew the perpetrator. Over 90%. To the myth of a woman walking in the middle of the night in an isolated city getting assaulted by someone with a balaclava is absolutely, utterly nonsense. 90% knew the perpetrator. It's ex-partners, boyfriends, neighbors, work colleagues, gym mates, whatever they are. So I think it's important that we don't look for the wrong person. There is no red hat and people saying, okay, I'm a monster. No.
Wow. Perception.
Okay. So I think this, exactly, perception. No?
Yeah.
And these individuals are masters in manipulative behavior. These monsters, they are good at making you believe they are kind and genuine and polite and respectful. You know what I mean? So that's important to always have an open mind. Don't trust too early. Keep an open mind. Enjoy your life, whatever that means, whatever works for you. Do whatever you want. I've always said in my book to women, you should do whatever you want. If you want to get drunk, get drunk. If you want to do whatever you want. And I would never restrict your freedom. But all I'm asking is, keep your mind open, keep your eyes open, keep your senses sharpened.
And listen to your senses, yeah. But I guess if they get too drunk, then their senses are sort of numbed as well. But I feel the message that you're really saying is, yes, go out, enjoy your life, but keep your, I call it spidey senses, your intuition, keep your intuition honed.
Yeah, and if you want to get drunk, that's totally fine. But then make sure that at least one of your friends is not. Yeah, I mean that's what you call a buddy system. If you feel that your workload has been so intense, or you've been through negativity and whatever in your personal life, and you want to literally let the guard down and get absolutely not drunk, that's fine. But then make sure that one of your friends is not and takes care of you. Make sure that you are getting home safely at the end of the night. That's all it takes. It's just communication,
Yeah. Well, Robert, I just want to say thank you. I know we dipped into parts, and there's so much more to your book. And I'm going to encourage, Christmas is coming up, the New Year's coming up, but you don't even need it as a present. Just buy it for your own knowledge, understanding, and information. And it would be lovely next year, Robert, to tap back into you to discuss the another aspect of the book, because like you said, it's touching on something that is a conversation that a lot of people are having more and more in my circles as well. And it's something that needs to be brought to the fore. And like Robert says also, if you've got a voice, use it. And your intuition, I've used my intuition. When I don't, that's when I sort of fall on my face and something happens. So, there's so many there's lots of advice that you've been given this evening that hopefully you can go out there, enjoy your Christmas, enjoy your New Year, but just keep it honed. And Robert, your book can be purchased on the
website. It's womens-safety.com. But I think if you type in women's safety or never a victim book, then you will find it straight away.
Brilliant. Thank you. And winding down, Robert, I just want to say thank you, because the title is what really, I thought I needed to speak to you, especially when you said never a victim. I thought, wow, that is so, so powerful.
Thank you.
But on that note, I just want to say thank you to all those who've listened. Any comments, I will respond to those after the show. You can still send in comments that I can field to Robert if you have. And wishing you all a wonderful, wonderful week. And same time, same place on Sunday. Another great interview on Sunday and next Tuesday. Robert, thank you so, so much for your advice, and looking forward to talking to you again.
Thank you so much for having me, Esther. I really genuinely appreciate it. It's great to have a chat with you. Thank you so very much.
Yes, thank you. Thank you. And now I'm going to play out.